Usually when we talk about medical diagnosis, there is this comforting expectation of precision.
Oh, for sure. It is very clinical.
Right. It is like
Right.
engineering. You break your arm, the X-ray shows that jagged white line on the black film, and the doctor just points at the screen and says, there it is. That is the problem.
Yeah, the evidence is objective, undeniable.
It is. But then you look at human relationships. You look at conflicts, at whisper campaigns, at character assassination, and suddenly that pristine X-ray machine is just broken.
Oh, totally broken.
We are looking at a landscape that is murky. And honestly, few things are murkier or more agonizing than being falsely accused.
It is the absolute worst.
It really is. Think about the physical reality of that experience for a second. How do you react when you face false accusations? When someone attacks your character with a total fabrication?
Your body literally reacts to it.
Yes. I am talking about that visceral, biological reaction. The blood rushes to your face, your cortisol levels spike. You lose sleep because you are lying awake at 3 in the morning running defense simulations in your head.
Right, playing out the argument over and over.
Just sweating it out in the dark. There is this immediate burning desire to set the record straight, to take matters into your own hands. You want to fight back and clear your name.
You want to corner the person spreading the lie and demand a retraction right then and there.
And really do. Or, and this is the tough part, do you wait? Do you step back, lower your hands, and trust the sovereign judge of the universe to handle it?
That is the big question, isn't it?
It is the biggest question. Welcome to Reformed Thinking. This is a special focus here on the Deep Dive. We are thrilled you're here with us in the room today.
Glad to have you here.
You are the third person in this conversation, and we are so glad you pulled up a chair. Today, we are opening up a highly specific portion of source material. We are looking at David Brown's commentary on Psalm 7.
And it is a fascinating piece of commentary, too.
Oh, it is brilliant. Our mission today is to examine the historical context of King David being ruthlessly hunted by Saul. We are going to look closely at the nature of God's righteous judgment, the concept of situational innocence, and, this is my favorite part, the almost ironic self-destructive nature of sin.
That part is incredible.
It is so good, and we are looking at all of this through a very specific theological lens. We are talking about God's absolute, comprehensive sovereignty over all human affairs, his role as the omniscient judge who sees our hidden, unspoken motives, and the absolute assurance that his justice always prevails.
Even when the timeline feels agonizingly slow to us.
Right, especially then. So it is great to sit down and unpack this material with you today.
Yeah, it is excellent to be here. And the scenario you painted right at the start, that visceral bodily reaction to slander, that is really the most accurate entry point into Psalm 7 we could possibly ask for.
You think so?
Absolutely, because when we read David Brown's commentary on this text, we are not looking at a sterile academic theological treatise written in some ivory tower.
Right, this is not theoretical.
No, not at all. We are looking at a man whose life is literally hanging by a thread. His reputation is being shredded in the royal courts, and he has been pushed to the absolute brink of human endurance.
Just a desperate situation.
Entirely. David is dealing with the brutal reality of God's sovereignty intersecting with intense human malice. I mean, we often think of God's sovereignty in very clean, abstract terms, right?
Yeah, like big cosmic decrees.
Yes, grand decrees and divine providence orchestrating the universe. But for David, God's sovereignty meant looking at a man who wanted him dead, feeling the dirt of a cave floor under his fingernails, and realizing that God was still entirely on the throne.
Wow. The dirt under his fingernails. That paints a picture.
It was gritty. To understand this, we have to look at the title of the psalm, which includes the word shigeon.
Shigeon. That is not a word you hear every day.
Definitely not. Brown defines this as a plaintive song or an elegy. He points out that while the background is somewhat obscure in the most granular details, the title points directly to David's persecution by King Saul.
Okay, so it is a song born out of being hunted.
Right. Verses 1 and 2 describe many enemies setting upon David, but one prominent enemy is singled out. And this enemy is compared to a wild beast tearing its prey to pieces.
Terrifying imagery.
It is. The commentary cross-references 1 Samuel 20.1, 23.23, and 26.19 to anchor this in actual history. The physical threat is just overwhelming here.
You know, when I read that definition of a shigeon as a plaintive, mournful song, my mind immediately went to music history.
Oh, yeah. How so?
Well, if we want an analogy to understand the tone of this psalm, I think about the earliest forms of Delta blues music.
Okay, like where this is going.
Like you listen to those old scratchy recordings from the 1920s and 30s,
Yeah.
someone like Son House or Robert Johnson sitting on a porch in Mississippi.
Right, very raw.
Exactly. It is not a polished, polite, heavily produced melody. It is a raw, unfiltered cry
Yeah.
of absolute anguish. The guitar is slapping, the voice is cracking, the rhythm is totally unpredictable.
That makes perfect sense.
It is the sound of someone whose back is firmly pinned against the wall, someone who is hurting, marginalized, and desperate. That irregular emotional pacing is what a shiggaion is.
It is a scream set to a melody.
Yes, it is not a hymn you sing politely in a choir. And then you add that terrifying imagery of the wild beast from the text. David says his enemy is like a lion, tearing its prey to pieces, dragging it away where no one can rescue it.
It makes the threat feel incredibly physical and immediate.
Right. This is not a theoretical theological problem for David. He is not sitting in a library debating the nuances of divine justice. He's literally being hunted.
He is listening for footsteps in the brush.
He is watching the horizon for dust clouds kicked up by chariots. The wild beast is circling his camp.
That Delta blues analogy captures the essence of the shiggaion beautifully, honestly. A shiggaion is erratic by nature.
Just completely unpredictable.
Yeah, the meter of the ancient Hebrew poetry in this specific psalm is thought to be highly irregular. It shifts back and forth, speeding up and slowing down, perfectly matching the volatile emotional state of a man who is running for his life.
Because his heartbeat is irregular, so his song is irregular.
Spot on. If we connect this to the bigger historical picture of 1 Samuel, we see the intense, almost unbearable theological tension David is living under.
Let us lay out that history for everyone.
Right. So David is the anointed king. God has already sent the prophet Samuel to Bethlehem. Samuel has literally poured the anointing oil over David's head in front of his brothers.
It is a done deal.
Yes. God has issued a sovereign decree that David will sit on the throne of Israel. That is an immovable, objective fact in the divine courtroom.
But his reality looks nothing like that.
Not even a little bit. What is David's current day-to-day reality? He is not sitting in a palace wearing a crown. He's living as a fugitive. He is hiding out in the limestone caves of Adullam.
Just scraping by in the wilderness.
Exactly. He is in the arid wilderness of Ziph. It is a place where water is scarce and the heat is brutal, and he's gathering around him this ragtag group of outcasts, debtors, and malcontents.
Quite the royal court.
Right. And all the while, he is being relentlessly hunted by the current sitting king, Saul. And Saul is entirely consumed by jealousy and paranoia.
And we have to remember the sheer scale of that hunt, too. I mean, Saul is not just some guy with a grudge.
Oh, no. He is the king.
Right. Saul has the entire standing army of Israel at his disposal. He has thousands of trained soldiers, trackers, informants, and he is utilizing all those national resources to track down one single man in the desert.
Precisely. Saul has weaponized the entire state apparatus against David, and this is where the doctrine of God's absolute sovereignty becomes intensely, painfully practical.
How so?
Well, God has ordained David's kingship, that is certain. Yet God has also ordained this agonizing period of intense, life-threatening persecution.
Wow. Yeah, that is a hard pill to swallow.
It is. God's sovereign decrees often involve periods of severe suffering for his people. The path to the throne goes directly through the scorching wilderness.
It is the crucible.
Yes. God is using Saul's wicked, paranoid persecution as the crucible to forge David into the king Israel actually needs. God is stripping away David's self-reliance.
But knowing it theologically does not make the breath of the wild beast on your neck any less terrifying in the moment.
Not at all. The prominent enemy singled out in verse 2, the one acting like a lion tearing its prey, is almost certainly Saul himself, or perhaps a primary military commander operating under Saul's direct orders.
So David is looking at this overwhelming state-sponsored force and just crying out.
He is crying out with that raw, irregular, Delta blues kind of desperation. He is pleading for his life.
Okay, so we have this terrifying picture of David being hunted like prey. But, you know, when a cornered animal is trapped, it usually just lashes out blindly.
It bites, it scratches, it fights dirty.
Right. But David does not do that. Instead, he actually formulates a highly specific, almost airtight legal defense to present to God.
It is remarkable.
It really is. I mean, how does a man running for his life have the presence of mind to draft a legal brief?
He is incredibly composed under pressure.
We see this shift from the raw emotion of the threat to a formal defense in verses 3 through 5. The commentary isolates verse 3, where David says, "If I have done this."
That is a key phrase.
Yeah. Brown points out that this refers to a specific crime charged in the words of Cush, and he connects this to the events in 1 Samuel 24.9.
Right, the whisper campaign.
Yes. Then in verse 4, we encounter a fascinating translation debate. The text talks about whether David injured my friend, and then there are two distinct phrases debated by scholars.
The delivered versus spoiled debate.
Right. It is, yea, I have delivered versus if I have spoiled my enemy. Brown notes that delivered makes good logical sense in the sentence, but it interrupts the psychological thought process of the poetry.
Which is why some scholars prefer the other reading.
Exactly. It prompts scholars to consider the alternative reading spoiled, and he cross-references the famous cave incident in 1 Samuel 24, where David spares Saul's life.
Such an intense scene.
Unbelievable scene. Finally, in verse 5, David lays out the consequence if he's actually guilty. He agrees he should lose his personal and official dignity, his honor, referencing Psalms 3.3 and 4.2.
He is putting everything on the line.
He really is.
Yeah.
But I want to zero in on this Cush character. Who is he, and why are his words causing David so much grief?
Understanding Cush is vital to grasping the legal nature of David's prayer. So Cush is identified as a Benjaminite.
Okay, why does that matter?
This is highly significant because Saul is also from the tribe of Benjamin. This means Cush is an insider.
Oh, I see.
He's a partisan loyalist. He is a political operative who has Saul's ear in the royal court. And what is Cush doing with that access?
Spreading rumors.
Worse, he is running a malicious whisper campaign. He is spreading targeted slander. He is likely telling Saul that David is actively plotting a violent, bloody coup.
So, actual treason.
Yes. Cush is whispering that David is a traitor, a treasonous rebel who wants to assassinate the king and seize power. That is the specific crime, that David refers to when he says, if I have done this.
So David is not just facing vague rumors that he is a bad guy?
No, he is facing a formal capital charge of high treason constructed by a political enemy. Cush is fueling Saul's pre-existing paranoia.
Giving Saul the excuse he needs.
Right, giving the king the justification he needs to utilize the army against David.
Okay, I need to push back here for a second.
Yep.
Because we have to view this through our established theological lens.
Okay, let's hear it.
As Protestants who adhere to the biblical truth regarding inherent human sinfulness, we believe that human beings are deeply flawed.
Absolutely.
We understand human depravity. We know the heart is deceitful above all things. We confess that all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God.
That is a core doctrine, yes.
So considering all of that, how can David, a man who we know is entirely capable of terrible sins, stand before a holy, perfect God and demand vindication based on his own innocence?
It is a great question.
It almost sounds arrogant. I mean, it sounds like he is claiming a moral perfection that we know historically and theologically he absolutely does not possess. How do we reconcile his plea of innocence with the reality of his sin nature?
That is the crucial tension in this passage. And the key here is making the vital distinction between claiming absolute moral perfection and claiming situational innocence.
Situational innocence. Okay, unpack that.
You are absolutely correct. David is a sinner. Later in his life, we will see the staggering, heartbreaking depths of his capacity for sin with Bathsheba and Uriah.
Right, he is definitely not perfect.
David knows he cannot stand before the judgment seat of God and claim total, comprehensive sinlessness. If God were to judge David based on strict, flawless obedience to the moral law, David would be condemned instantly.
We all would be.
Exactly. But that is not what David is doing here. David is presenting a very specific legal brief regarding a very specific charge.
The charge from Cush.
Right. Cush has accused him of high treason, of actively plotting to murder King Saul. David is bringing that one specific charge before the divine court and saying, on this specific count, regarding this particular accusation of treason, I am completely innocent.
So he is narrowing the scope of the trial.
Yes, he is.
He is pleading not guilty to the charge of treason, not guilty to the reality of being a flawed human being who needs grace.
That is exactly the distinction. And to prove his point, the commentary directs us to that incredible cinematic scene in 1 Samuel 24.
The cave.
Yes, this is the cave at En-Gedi. The context here is wild.
It really is.
Saul is hunting David with 3,000 elite hand-picked soldiers. They are sweeping the rocky terrain. Saul needs to relieve himself, or as the text delicately puts it, cover his feet.
Right, nature calls.
Right. So Saul separates from his massive army and goes alone into a dark, sprawling limestone cave. And who is hiding in the deepest pitch-black recesses of that exact cave?
David and his desperate men.
The collision of circumstances there is just staggering.
It is providence orchestrating an intense moral test, right?
It absolutely is. David's men whispered to him in the dark, "This is the day the Lord has delivered your enemy into your hands."
And from a purely human, pragmatic, military perspective, this is David's golden opportunity.
Oh, 100%. He can end the manhunt, stop the suffering of his men, claim the throne he was promised, and secure his own safety with one quick strike in the dark.
It would be so easy.
So easy. And this leads directly into the translation debate the commentary mentions in verse 4, spoiled my enemy versus delivered.
Right.
David had the perfect, unimpeded opportunity to spoil his enemy, to take Saul's life, strip his royal armor, and walk out of that cave as the undisputed king.
But he does not do it.
No, instead he chose to deliver him. David crept up quietly in the shadows and only cut off a small corner of Saul's royal robe to prove he had been there.
Just a piece of fabric.
Right. And even then, his conscience struck him. He felt profound guilt for showing even that minor disrespect to God's anointed king.
That is wild to me.
He fiercely restrained his men, forbidding them from attacking. He let Saul walk out of that cave completely unharmed.
You know, that level of restraint goes against every human survival instinct. To hold the man who is trying to murder you at knife point and just let him walk away, it requires something supernatural.
It is a breathtaking demonstration of trusting God's sovereign timeline. David utterly refused to force God's hand.
He would not take a shortcut.
Right, he refused to commit murder to obtain the promise God had given him. He left the vengeance, the timing, and the method entirely up to God.
Wow.
So when David prays, verse 5, and says that if he is actually guilty of plotting against Saul, then let the enemy trample his life to the ground and lay his honor in the dust.
He means it.
He means it, and he is speaking with the totally clear conscience of a man who literally held his enemy's life in his hands and chose mercy.
He is basically saying, Lord, you saw what happened in the dark of that cave.
You saw my restraint. You know the truth of my actions. I am entirely innocent of the malicious slander Cush is spreading.
That distinction between situational innocence and absolute perfection is incredibly helpful for anyone listening today.
I think so too.
Because it means that when you are falsely accused at work, or when a rumor destroys your reputation in your community, you can confidently go to God and ask for vindication regarding that specific lie.
Yes. You can demand justice for that slander.
Even while knowing you are a flawed person who relies entirely on God's grace for salvation, you do not have to possess a flawless track record to ask God to defend you against a vicious falsehood.
That is a very comforting truth.
So, having established this situational innocence, David then turns to address the judge directly in verses 6 through 8. And the way he speaks to God is jarring.
Very jarring.
It is bold, it is loud, and it's almost startling to read.
It is a massive rhetorical shift, honestly. He moves from defending his character to making demands of the Almighty.
He does. David Brown points out that in verse 6, God is invoked as if he is currently careless or asleep regarding David's agonizing situation.
Which is quite a way to speak to the Creator.
Right. The commentary references Psalms 3.7 and 9.18 to show this is a recurring theme. David compares the enemy's rage to a violent flood rising over a river's banks.
A total inundation.
And David asks God for judgment commanded or ordained. He wants a just decision issued from the bench. Then in verse 7, we see this grand imagery of the people seeking justice, compassing or surrounding God.
A huge gathering.
Yes. David asks God to return thou on high, to assume the judgment seat as a just ruler over the assembly. Finally, in verse 8, David virtually asks for a formal acquittal. He confidently demands a judgment from the judge of all the earth regarding this specific case of treason.
He wants his day in court.
Right. But I have to ask about the tone of verse 6. David is literally telling God to awake.
Yeah.
He is speaking as if God is taking a nap while David is running for his life. Is it acceptable for a believer to speak to God this way?
It feels risky, right?
It feels borderline disrespectful to command the creator of the universe to wake up. But then I think about the flash flood analogy the text brings to mind.
Tell me about that.
Well, if you are standing in a dry desert wadi in the Middle East, and suddenly a massive wall of brown churning water comes crashing down from the mountains cresting the banks.
You are in immediate peril.
Right. You do not politely whisper for assistance. You scream. You yell for someone to wake up, throw you a rope, and pull you out.
The flash flood in a desert wadi is a brilliant way to understand the terrifying urgency of this prayer.
It feels that immediate.
When David says, "Arise, O Lord, in your anger," and cries out for God to awake, we're dealing with a theological concept called anthropomorphism.
Anthropomorphism. Break that down for us.
This is when we attribute human physical characteristics or human limitations to God in order to understand him, or to express our feelings from our limited, finite perspective.
Got it. Like saying God has hands or is sleeping.
Exactly. Theologically, we know with absolute certainty that God never slumbers nor sleeps. His omniscience and omnipresence are total.
He does not need a nap.
Right. He is acutely, perfectly aware of every single agonizing detail of David's suffering. He is not careless. He is not distracted by other events in the universe.
But when you are the one drowning in the floodwaters of slander, it feels like he is distracted.
Absolutely. From the human perspective, from the perspective of the man standing in the path of Saul's rage with a target on his back, God's delayed justice feels exactly like inactivity.
It feels like silence.
Yes. When the wicked prosper, when slander goes unchecked for months or years, it feels to the suffering believer like God is resting. David is giving voice to that raw, unfiltered human experience.
And God is okay with that.
The Psalms show us over and over again that God welcomes this kind of honest, agonizing prayer. He wants us to bring our desperation, our confusion, and our panic directly to him.
He does not demand that we sanitize our emotions before we approach the throne.
No.
He does not.
He can handle our screaming.
He can handle it, and he invites it. And notice what David is actually asking for when he screams for God to awake.
What is he asking for? He is not asking for a chaotic, vigilante lightning strike. He is asking for judgment commanded. He is asking for a formal, sovereign decree from the bench.
Back to the legal framework.
Right. This leads us into the incredible, sweeping imagery of verse 7. Picture a grand cosmic courtroom. The word compass means to encircle or surround.
So there is a crowd.
There's an assembly of peoples, a vast gathering of nations watching this trial unfold. The surrounding nations are looking on to see how the God of Israel handles justice for his anointed servant.
The stakes are incredibly high.
Very high. David says, "Return thou on high." He is picturing God ascending the steps to the highest, most exalted judgment seat in the cosmos.
He is calling the Supreme Court into session.
He is.
He is saying the time for waiting is over. The court must convene.
He is demanding a formal verdict. In verse 8, when David says, "Judge me, O Lord, according to my righteousness," he is essentially placing his legal case file squarely on the bench of the supreme judge of the universe.
Just sliding the file right across the desk.
Yes, he is saying, "I have laid out my evidence. You saw I spared Saul in the cave. I am innocent of treason. Now, God, take the bench, review the facts, and issue a binding sovereign decree of acquittal that all the nations will hear."
That takes a lot of faith.
It is a breathtaking display of confidence in the perfect justice of God. He is fully trusting that the judge of all the earth will look at the evidence and do right.
So if David is asking God to convene this trial, how does God actually conduct it?
That is the next big question.
Because human courts rely on witnesses, who can lie, and physical evidence, which can be tampered with. How does the divine judge evaluate humanity?
It is entirely different from a human court.
We find the answer in the specific methods God uses in verses 9 through 13. The text provides a granular look at the anatomy of divine justice.
This is where we see the terrifying and comforting detail of God's absolute omniscience.
Yes, the commentary breaks down verse 9, where it says God judges the hearts and reins.
Hearts and reins.
David Brown explains that the reins represent the affections and motives of men, acting as the seat of emotions. He compares it to how modern language uses the words heart, bosom, or breast, and references Psalm 16.7 and 26.2 to show this pattern in Scripture.
It is a recurring anatomical metaphor.
Right. Then in verse 10, the word defense literally translates from the Hebrew as shield, cross-referencing Psalm 5.1.
A literal shield.
In verse 11, the word judgeth carries over from verse 8, with the wicked implied as the sole objects of God's righteous anger.
God's anger is highly targeted.
Yes, and verses 12 and 13 point out wicked men by a sudden change in person, selecting one individual as a representative of all wicked men everywhere.
Zooming in on one target.
Exactly. And here, the text highlights military figures. The commentary argues heavily against the translation arrows for burning, which would be appropriate for besieging a walled town.
Right, siege warfare.
Right, and instead throws its weight behind the translation against the persecutors, which makes far better sense for open combat against a specific individual.
The linguistic details here are so crucial.
They really are. Let us look at this word reins first. In older English translations, and certainly in the ancient Hebrew mindset, the reins refer specifically to the kidneys, or the lower internal organs.
Which sounds very odd to us today.
It sounds strange to our modern, scientifically informed ears. We associate thoughts with the brain and emotions with the heart. But think about the common phrase, "I feel it in my gut."
Right.
When you are terrified or when you know a situation is deeply wrong, you do not feel it in your elbow or your knee. You feel a tight knot in your stomach.
Your body tells you.
Your internal organs physically react to stress and fear. It's a visceral, hidden place inside your body. By saying God searches the hearts and reins, it highlights that God does not just look at external, visible actions. He is judging the absolute most hidden, internal, unspoken motives.
The anatomical analogy is spot on. In the ancient Near East, the kidneys were considered the most inaccessible, sensitive, and vital parts of the human body.
They're buried deep.
They were buried deep inside, protected by layers of muscle and fat. They represented the deepest, most hidden self.
The real you.
Yes, the secret thoughts, the concealed motives, the whispered agendas that no human being could ever perceive or measure. This is the absolute bedrock of God's righteous judgment.
Because human courts cannot access that.
When human courts convene, they are severely limited. They can only judge based on external evidence. They look at documents, they listen to witness testimony, they examine alibis.
But human judges cannot see the motives. They cannot see the rein.
They cannot see what Cush was truly thinking when he whispered his lies to Saul. They cannot measure his ambition or his jealousy.
They only see the outward action.
Right. But God can. God's omniscience means he reads the internal, unseen reality with perfect, flawless clarity.
He sees it all.
He knows David's pure motives in sparing Saul in the cave. He knows David acted out of reverence, not fear. And simultaneously, God knows the venomous, ambitious, power-hungry motives driving Cush and Saul.
That is terrifying for the guilty.
This reality brings absolute terror to the wicked because they cannot hide behind a good public relations campaign.
You cannot spin God.
You cannot. But it brings immense, overwhelming comfort to the innocent. Because God sees the hidden truth of the situation, his judgment is flawless and entirely fair.
Okay, so we have this perfect judge who sees everything. But I want to ask you about the linguistic insight in verses 12 and 13.
The arrows.
Yeah, the arrows. The commentary spends a surprising amount of time debating the military translation here. Brown argues passionately against the idea of burning arrows, which represents siege warfare, and argues for arrows aimed against the persecutors, which sounds more like sniper-like open combat.
Yes, it is a very specific debate.
Why does that specific linguistic distinction matter so much to our understanding of God's justice?
It matters intensely because it reveals the precision of God's justice.
The precision.
Think about ancient siege warfare. You surround a walled city, you set up your archers, and you launch hundreds of burning arrows over the walls into the city.
Just raining down fire.
It is indiscriminate. It is an area of effect attack designed to cause panic. It burns down houses, it hits civilians, it destroys infrastructure, it causes mass chaotic destruction.
Innocent people get hurt.
The innocent suffer alongside the guilty. That is emphatically not how God operates in his specific judgments against individuals.
So he is not raining down random fire.
The preferred translation, arrows aimed against the persecutors, implies that God is a master archer taking precise, deliberate, sniper-like aim at specific guilty individuals.
Wow. It is a surgical strike. There is no collateral damage.
Yes, a surgical strike. God's justice is never sloppy. It is never careless. He prepares his weapons, he bends his bow, and he aims directly at the one who is unrepentant.
That is a terrifying image if you were the one in the crosshairs.
It is. And while he is acting as a terrifying warrior against the wicked, verse 10 tells us he is simultaneously acting as a literal shield for the innocent.
So he is doing both at the same time.
He is actively defending David while simultaneously taking precise aim at Saul. It demonstrates God's complete sovereign control over every single aspect of the battlefield.
He is managing the whole board.
He is orchestrating the defense and the offense with infinite precision, ensuring the innocent are protected and the guilty are targeted.
Here is where the text introduces a fascinating twist.
Oh, this is the best part.
It is so good. God is actively preparing his weapons, as we just discussed. He's bending the bow. He's sharpening the sword. But verses 14 through 16 reveal the self-destructive irony of sin.
The irony is so thick here.
Sometimes God does not even need to fire the arrow. The commentary notes that verse 14 expresses the general idea that wicked men labor extensively to do evil.
They work so hard at it.
We really do. Verses 15 and 16 are expository, verse 14. They illustrate how the devices of the wicked end in bitter disappointment, and falsify their own expectations.
It blows up in their faces.
Yes. Brown cross-references 1 Samuel 18.17 and 31.2 to illustrate this principle playing out in actual history. When I read about the wicked digging a deep pit and falling into it themselves, I cannot help but think of a classic cartoon analogy.
Let me guess. Looney Tunes.
You know it. You have the villain, maybe Wile E. Coyote, and he spends all this time, all this intense effort, setting up an elaborate trap for the Roadrunner.
The ACME Corporation anvils.
Right. He rigs a complex tripwire, he hoists a massive heavy iron anvil high into a tree, he measures the angles perfectly, he labors over it, sweating in the desert heat.
He puts in a full day's work.
And then he takes one step back to admire his brilliant work, steps on his own tripwire, and drops the massive anvil squarely on his own head.
Splat.
The psalmist is describing this exact phenomenon, but with deadly, serious, real-world stakes. The wicked work incredibly hard to build a trap to destroy the innocent, only to fall headfirst into it themselves.
The falling anvil analogy captures the absurdity and the self-destructive nature of sin perfectly.
It is just so absurd.
We are looking at the heavy theological weight of this irony. This is a prime, exquisite example of divine providence at work in the world.
How so?
We often think of God's judgment strictly as lightning bolts striking from heaven or the earth opening up to swallow people.
Right, active intervention.
And sometimes in Scripture it is direct and immediate like that. But very often God's sovereignty is so absolute, his mastery over the universe is so complete, that he simply allows the natural consequences of depraved schemes to recoil upon the people who created them.
He just lets the physics of sin play out.
He turns the wicked's own momentum against them. He uses their own kinetic energy to destroy them.
He lets them drop the anvil on themselves. They do all the work of their own destruction.
Yes. Look closely at the language of verse 14. It says, "The wicked prevaileth with iniquity."
Travaileth. That is a heavy word.
It uses the vivid imagery of childbirth. They conceive mischief, they labor over it, they gestate this evil plot in the dark.
And what is the result?
What do they finally give birth to after all that agonizing effort? Falsehood, disappointment, absolute ruin.
Wow.
The commentary points us to 1 Samuel 31.2 to show how this actually played out in Saul's history. Think about Saul's trajectory.
It is a sad trajectory.
He spent the latter half of his reign totally obsessed with hunting David. He abandoned his duties as king. He ignored the administration of justice.
He just let the kingdom fall apart.
He left the borders vulnerable to chase a phantom threat through the wilderness. He slaughtered the innocent priests at Nob simply because he suspected they helped David.
Such a brutal overreaction.
He engaged in forbidden witchcraft at Endor. He dug a massive kingdom-sized pit to trap David. He exhausted the national treasury and the military on this personal vendetta.
And what was the historical result of all that labor?
The Philistines invaded. Because Saul was so distracted by his paranoid, obsessive pursuit of David, the military readiness of Israel crumbled.
He left the back door wide open.
On Mount Gilboa, the Philistine army hit the weakened Israelite forces. The battle was a total slaughter. The Philistine archers found Saul on the battlefield, and he was critically wounded.
The archers finally got him.
Rather than face capture and torture by the uncircumcised Philistines, Saul took his own sword, planted it in the ground, and fell on it.
He died by his own weapon.
The very military force he corrupted to serve his jealousy fell apart, and Saul died in the exact pit he had spent years digging. His obsession with David blinded him to the actual threat that destroyed him.
It is a tragic end, but it is flawless poetic justice.
It is the terrifying elegance of God's justice. The trap Saul set for David became his own grave. This is what David is praising God for in this song.
He sees the big picture now.
He realizes that God does not always have to intervene with a spectacular miracle to save him. God does not have to part the Red Sea every time.
Sometimes he just lets people ruin themselves.
Sometimes God just lets the wicked exhaust themselves digging a massive hole and then sits back and watches as they stumble blindly into it.
That is wild.
It is a profound, a very stabilizing comfort for anyone facing organized malice or a coordinated attack on their character.
Because you do not have to fight back in the same way.
Right. The harder the wicked work to destroy you, the deeper they are digging their own pit. You do not have to launch a counterattack. You do not have to play their game. You just have to wait for them to step on their own tripwire.
You just have to wait, hold your peace, and trust the sovereign judge to manage the timing.
That is the hardest part, but it is the truth.
This brings us to the final thought of the psalm, verse 17. The commentary highlights the phrase, his righteousness, referencing Psalm 5.8.
His righteousness.
This divine righteousness is illustrated clearly through the active defense of his servant and the corresponding perfectly measured punishment of the wicked. David closes the psalm with rejoicing, singing praises to the Lord Most High, fully confident of God's aid.
Think about the massive sweeping shift in tone from verse 1 to verse 17.
Oh, it is night and day.
The psychological change is complete.
He starts out terrified, running from a wild beast, crying out a plaintive, erratic shigayon, sweating and panicked.
Just a total mess.
And he ends by singing a confident song of praise to the name of the Lord Most High.
What changed?
Well, the external circumstances have not necessarily changed yet. Saul is still out there. The army is still hunting him. The cave is still dark and cold.
So it is an internal shift.
Yes, David's internal perspective has been completely realigned by remembering the unchangeable nature of God. He remembers the cosmic courtroom. He remembers the judge who sees the reins and the kidneys, the hidden motives.
He remembers the shield.
He remembers the literal shield, the targeted, precise arrows, and the self-destructive anvil of sin.
That internal realignment is the entire purpose of reading the Psalms.
They are not just poetry.
No, they are not just nice poetry to read when you are sad. They are robust theology in motion. David has theologically reasoned his way from absolute terror to unshakable trust.
He preached the truth to himself.
He applied the heavy doctrine of God's absolute sovereignty to his immediate physical panic, and the result is peace. He knows that God's righteousness will be vindicated in the end.
Whether God defends him actively with the shield or passively by letting Saul fall into his own pit on Mount Gilboa.
David knows the final verdict is secure.
So what does this all mean for you, listening right now? We started by talking about that physical, visceral reaction to slander, that burning desire to clear your own name and take vengeance on the people lying about you.
It is a natural reaction, but it is not the best one.
No. We want to leave you with a challenging question to mull over this week. When someone attacked your character, when they whisper the words of Cush behind your back in the office or in your family, do you exhaust yourself digging pits and setting traps to ruin them?
Do you try to match their malice with your own clever strategy?
Or do you lower your hands and leave your vindication entirely to the judge who searches the hearts and reins?
That is the real test of faith.
Reflect on this, how releasing your desperate need for personal vengeance might actually be the absolute clearest proof that you trust God's sovereign justice.
Trusting that he sees the hidden motives.
Trusting that he is preparing his instruments of justice, and trusting that the anvil will fall where it is supposed to in his perfect timing.
Amen to that.
Thank you so much for pulling up a chair and joining us for this special edition of Reformed Thinking here on The Deep Dive. We appreciate your time, and we will catch you on the next one.